You ever read something and you can just feel it leading you somewhere? Like there's a structure, a persuasive force at work, but it's hard to put your finger on it? Well, today, we're going to do just that. We're going to deconstruct a theological argument piece by piece to see how the author makes their case. So, let's dive in. Okay, so the whole argument, the entire text, really boils down to this one single question that gets asked over and over again: who do we believe? And you got to understand, this isn't just a catchy title. No, it's the engine driving everything. It's a constant challenge, forcing the reader to make a decision. All right, first section, a fundamental question. So the author's main tactic here is really clever and pretty powerful. They basically set up the entire world as a choice between just two options, two opposing voices. There's absolutely no room for gray area, no middle ground. You've got God's word on one side and man's word on the other. That's it. Pick one. So let's take a look at how this actually plays out. The author pits God's word against man's word using these really stark side-by-side comparisons. The first battlefield, human nature itself. So on one side, you've got God's word, a direct quote from Romans saying there's nothing good in man, period. And on the other, you've got man's word, what the author says you hear everywhere from the press, even from the pulpit, that, yeah, there is some good in people. See what's happening? Right away, you're forced to choose. Which one is it? And the pattern continues. Next up, salvation. On one hand, God says you can't come to him unless it's granted by the Father. But on the other hand, man says, no, anyone can come. The door's open for everybody. They're two totally different ideas. They can't both be right. So again, that question comes back. Who do you believe? Then the author takes it to a bigger scale, the state of the world. God's word? These are perilous times. Things are getting worse. Man's word? Oh, things are getting better and better. We're progressing. It's this classic clash, right? A pessimistic biblical view versus a kind of optimistic humanistic one. The author is framing one as divine truth and the other as wishful thinking. Okay, so now that this pattern of conflict, this constant God says versus man says, is established, the author does something brilliant. They bring in a story from the Old Testament to act as a powerful metaphor for this exact choice. And that brings us to the Kadesh Barnea choice. And check this out. Before even telling the story, the author frames it with this verse from Hebrews. It basically gives away the ending, the moral of the story, right up front. They could not enter in because of unbelief. The whole point is being drilled home. The problem, the reason for failure, was unbelief. So here's the story in a nutshell. Step 1, God makes a promise. He says, I'm giving you this land. That's God's word, right? Step 2, the reports come in. 10 of the spies come back terrified, talking about giants and fortified cities. That's their report. Based on what they saw, that's man's word. But 2 spies, just 2, give a good report based on God's promise. Step 3, the choice. Who do the people believe? The scared majority of 10. And step 4, the consequence is brutal. 40 years of wandering in the desert. You see how it's a perfect parallel to the choices we were just looking at. And this is the real kicker. The author's point is that Kadesh Barnea isn't just some dusty old story. It's a spiritual test that repeats itself. They're arguing that every believer, you, me, everyone, eventually comes to their own Kadesh Barnea, a moment where we have to choose between the popular majority report and the often lonely but faithful report of God's word. Okay, so you might be wondering, where is all this going? All this God says, man says, and the Kadesh Barnea story, what's the point? Well, it's all a setup. It's been building towards the author's central thesis, which is about arguing for a better hope. So that whole framework we just talked about, the author now uses it to draw a line between 2 different kinds of hope you find in the New Testament. First, there was a hope offered specifically to the nation of Israel, early on. But then, the author argues, something changed, and a different hope, a later hope, was revealed just to the Apostle Paul. And the argument gets really specific. It drills down into the original Greek. The author zooms in on this one word, exanastasis. They argue it doesn't just mean a general resurrection for everybody. No, it's something special. It's an out from among the dead resurrection. The idea is that it's a selective event, a prize you have to strive for, not just a given. This table really lays out the whole argument visually. Look at the left column, the parousia hope. The author labels this as an early thing for all believers at the time. But then look at the right column, the upward call. This is positioned as a later revelation, something that came after the offer to Israel was withdrawn.
And notice the nature is different. It's not for everyone, it's a prize. This, according to the author, is that better hope for us today. It's the equivalent of believing the two spies' good report instead of the majority's bad one.
And just like that, this whole journey brings us right back to where we began. We're facing the final challenge.
So let's just recap the persuasive strategy we've uncovered. First, you create a simple black and white choice. Then, you use a powerful Bible story as an allegory to make that choice feel really high stakes. And finally, you apply that whole framework to your main point, arguing for this special, better hope that was supposedly hidden until later. It's a pretty compelling structure.
And at the very end, the author turns the spotlight right back on you, the reader. They're basically asking, are you going to go with the majority report, with what most people believe? Or are you going to be like those two spies and believe this other report, this thing the author is presenting as a deeper, later truth from God? You see, the text doesn't just give you facts to consider. It demands a choice. And it leaves you with that same piercing challenge it started with. Who will you believe?